Oh, they're on it. And it's 6 o'clock. Good evening, everyone. It is now 6 o'clock. We will call this regularly scheduled meeting of the San Benito County Planning Commission to order. Could you please read the temporary rules that are in place?
The San Benito County Planning Commission welcomes your comments. Each individual speaker will be limited to a presentation total of 3 minutes. When addressing the commission via Zoom, phone, or in the chambers, please state your name and county in which you reside in for the record. Please address the commission as a whole through the chair. If participating on Zoom, select the Participants tab and click the Raise Hand icon. If you are using a phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. When your turn arrives, you will hear that you have been unmuted. If participating in person in the chambers, please complete a speaker card identifying the item in which you wish to speak and provide your completed card to the clerk prior to consideration. Speaker cards are available on the table at the entrance.
Thank you. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Pack, if you could lead us, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If we could please get a roll call.
Devin Pack, District 5.
Richway, District 2.
Oh my goodness. Oh, sorry, Robert Rodriguez, District 1. I sure went there.
Robert Gibson, District 4.
And Commissioner Scagliotti, District 3, is absent.
Thank you. Any department announcements?
I do have an announcement. Robin Bolster-Grant, Assistant Director of Planning and Building. I want to direct the Commissioner's attention to the consent item number 2. This is a resolution pursuant to a law that was signed in September 16th, having to do with the continuing emergency COVID status. It provides the authority for public agencies to hold virtual meetings so long as the state of emergency remains in place, and allows us to comply with the Brown Act. We did not include the resolution that is in the packet that you have in the posted material. We are still hoping that the commission, in light of the emergency status and the need to be flexible, will adopt this resolution regardless of the noticing glitch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No other department announcements then? Is there any public comment? The San Benito County Planning Commission welcomes you to this meeting and encourages your participation. This is for any items that are in the purview of the Planning Commission but not on this agenda. Are there any public comments via Zoom?
No public comment via Zoom.
Any public comment in the chambers? See none, public comment is closed. Consent agenda. We have the item that was brought up regarding COVID. We have the acknowledgement of the certificate of posting, acknowledgement of public hearing. We also have the draft minutes from October 20th, 2021. I will start with corrections to the minutes. For the item regarding the Promontory, I recused myself because I live across the road, and it was stated that I was an aye vote. It was a 5-0. That just needs to be corrected that I did not vote on that item. That was all I had. Were there any other corrections or additions to the minutes? Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the new COVID rules regarding Zoom?
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Public hearing. Item number 5. PLN 210005 Guerra Walnut Harvest Warehouse Use Permit.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Michael Kelly, Associate Planner, here to talk about this project, the Agricultural Harvest Warehouse. Let's see, just a moment. Agricultural Harvest Warehouse at 1550 Fallon Road to store harvested walnuts. Here is 1550 Fallon Road, about midway, closer to Fairview, but midway between San Felipe Road and Fairview Road. The project is to store harvested walnuts in a new warehouse, 33,120 square feet of warehouse, in which the most active season would be October and harvest season, with 10 employees present at that time and 5 trucks coming and going daily. The next 7 months would be less active, with 1 to 2 trucks daily, and the rest of the year, June through September, would be the building being idle with basic maintenance in order to keep it available and ready for the October harvest season that comes once again. This is just storage of harvested walnuts. There's no processing at this site. Processing would take somewhere else, or take place somewhere else. Just storage at this site. Here is the site, 20 acres, currently orchard, and 3.15 acres of which would be used for the building site. And this is the building site where you see Fallon Road at the south to the right, with trucks entering the driveway, greeted at the gatehouse, and then proceeding on to the warehouse for loading and unloading. The warehouse is great majority just storage, but would also have office space and a bit of second level storage at the front end of the building, but otherwise just ground level storage of the harvest. You also see truck scale over here, new well with water line, and swale for collecting stormwater runoff, 250 cubic yards of earth moving also on the 3.15 acre site. Here is the building, which would be the top view from Grant Road, if you were to be able to see the building through the orchard, which you might not. And then the south view from Fallon Road, again, you might not be able to see it because of the orchard that's there. The resolution that's in your packet has multiple findings, including one related to the California Environmental Quality Act, to account for any environmental effects that may come from this new use. And the resolution states that it can be seen with certainty that there would be no significant environmental impact, given the regulations in place, given the conditions of approval in the resolution, given the circumstances of the site, the low sensitivity, environmental sensitivity of the site and its area, as further described in the finding and also on the screen here. It's an agricultural activity in an agricultural area, serving the agriculture that would be happening anyway. Transportation that would be taking place anyway to transport the product. This would just fit in with that transportation that would be taking place anyway. Along this established thoroughfare, no new road connection needed, and the site would remain great majority continuing to be agriculture as an orchard. So staff believes it can be seen that it would not require mitigation of significant environmental impacts, just be it would be qualifying for this finding. Also in the findings, consistency with the general plan policy, including the land use element, which calls this agriculture, which supports having agricultural support uses such as warehouses, and the project would also serve the policies that are shown here. Support existing agricultural operations to provide for flexibility and economic viability of farming, and it would be a warehouse that would serve that agricultural viability. The general plan also encourages economic development, and this would be a form of job creation and new investment and support to existing local business, as stated in the policy. Also, the health and safety element calls for limits on operational noise. Condition in the resolution implements that. The resolution also refers to the zoning, which calls this agricultural productive zoning district, which allows agricultural support uses. Warehouse is not specifically listed, but is consistent with the uses that are listed. So that's the physical, regulatory, and policy setting, and staff therefore recommends that the commission review the staff report, hold a public hearing, hear the proponents and opponents of the project, consider the resolution and adopt the resolution to approve the permit subject to the findings and conditions of approval. I can answer questions if you have any.
Are there any questions of the commissioners? No? Okay. Is there any public comment via Zoom?
No comment via Zoom.
Is there any public comment in the chambers? Seeing none, public comment is closed. What is the will of the commission?
I make a motion we approve.
I second.
So we have a motion to approve Resolution 2021-next with all findings and conditions. And there is a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Pardon me. May I ask who is the second?
Commissioner Pack.
Okay.
Item number 6, PLN 210016, VJ Vaidyanathan minor subdivision. I think I got that.
Okay. Could you go to the screen, please? Yeah. Good evening, Commissioners. This is a request to divide a 23.7 acre parcel into an agricultural parcel of 23.7 acres into a 10.1 and a 13.6 acre. Quickly, the structure of the review will give us the location, context, the description, land use and zoning designations, environmental evaluation, leading to a staff recommendation. So the location is on Duncan Avenue, west of Bixby Road and northeast of San Juan Bautista. The subject property is surrounded on 3 sides. I don't know that cursor trick, how you make that thing red and big, but that's okay. On 3 sides, on the west, on the south, and on the east, with agricultural and similar farming uses. The original parcels of this 23.7, the original 23.7 acre piece is a legal lot of record. It's not a Williamson Act. It is on prime farmland and grade 1 soils, and is mostly not in the floodplain except for a small area adjacent to the river. And so that's our starting point, and there are 2 existing residences on the property. This is now turned with the river to the left or to the north, and east is at the top. This would reflect the 10.1 acre parcel on the west side and the larger 13.6 acre. A farm road circumscribes the property here and adjacent to the river. Is that even visible on the screen, my cursor? I don't think so. Alt control. Hold the control button. Ah, nice. All right, thank you. So here's my little Christmas light on the farm road that circumscribes the property here. There are 2 existing residences, and the lot line would have each of those become primary structures on their individual lots. No roads or access are proposed or needed on the property at this time. The land use designation is agriculture and the application is a proposal to continue that agriculture and actually to provide smaller parcels so that persons included in the staff report mentioned a lower point of entry for ownership of land, ostensibly for farm workers. 23.7 being unaffordable, we've got our applicants here are trying to help subdivide it and then sell it to persons who have worked farms before. The zoning designation is agricultural productive, which allows, in addition to the continued agricultural practices, residential property, but we have no development proposed at this time. The project is environmentally, staff recommends a categorical exemption covered by the common sense rule that applies only to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment. Proposal is to keep farming on the property just with smaller ownership units. So staff has found this very consistent with the agricultural policies. The project site is not located in an environmentally sensitive area, and they want to keep farming. And so staff recommends that you make the findings in the attached staff report and the attached resolution to approve this lot split at this property owned by 700 Duncan Holdings, subject to the conditions that are found there. And the conditions that are included in the resolution are pretty standard approval for a minor subdivision as this. So our applicant has chosen to participate by Zoom this evening and not come down. So I'm available for questions, but that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the commissioners? No. Is the applicant wishing to speak at this time?
Yeah.
Would you, do you give her the instructions to unmute for Sheena?
Doesn't have her name.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
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 Yes, Sheena, would you please let us have your name and identify yourself, please, and the county you live in?
Yes, please. My name is Sheena Vaidyanathan, and I am the applicant at the property in San Juan Bautista. I currently reside in Santa Clara County, where I work as a public school teacher. As mentioned in the staff report, we are doing the subdivision to create smaller parcels so that one of the smaller farmers, small family farms on that are leasing right now, can fulfill their dream of owning the land that they farm. We worked with a few nonprofits, including ALBA, Kitchen Table Advisors, and California FarmLink, to identify farmers before we leased. And in fact, David Mancera, who's from one of the nonprofits, is on the call to answer any questions on this. I want to say that there is no intent to do any development or build any subdivision on this property. There are no improvement projects planned, or we have no funding or ability to do anything more than that. All we are asking right now is to divide it as per the tentative map, create a final parcel map and be able to, so that this other farmer can acquire this land. So based on what we are intending, and with the help of review of these conditions by some other experts, I believe that some of these conditions are not really applicable to what we are doing. There is no improvement plan or no projects to be done. As I said, you just need to be divided and continue farming and using what we already have on that property. And as such, I believe conditions in the Word document that was sent out, 8, 9, 10, 14, 15, 16, as well as 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, all relate to subdivisions, and that's something that we are not doing. So since they're not applicable, I would request that these be looked at to be removed. I also want to mention that there is a condition on 28 about parkland. The northern end of this property is along the river, and as an educator, my goal has been always to build that with hedgerows, pollinators, native plants, and create like a space that's not, it's not going to be farmed. It's along the river. I believe there's a trail coming there, and we would like to actually dedicate this to the county to, for, I think it's for education research reasons, it would be good to do that. So that is how we are hoping to satisfy condition 28. I just wanted to kind of add that also. I think that is my 3 minutes, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but you may proceed. You're not. This isn't public comment. You're the applicant.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I wasn't sure if I had only 3 minutes. I was going super fast. I'm so sorry. This is new to me, so I'm not sure. So those are my comments. We have looked through it, and we have spent some time, resources, and money to get the obviously to get all the plans and the. In fact, one of the things we have done, I think it was item 19, which was the soil test, soil sample reports, or what is it called? Geo, I'm just looking at it, sorry, looking through my list. Yeah, the geotechnical engineering report, I believe that 19 we have already submitted, and the rest of the items, I believe, are not applicable to us. And then I mentioned to you about dedicated parkland, what our intent is, and I just thought I wanted to share that with you, and if there's anything else you need, any other information, I'll be happy to provide.
Thank you very much. Would staff like to comment on the conditions that the applicant mentioned?
Yes, I spoke with the applicant and introduced just the other day how the procedures would go, and that whether she was in agreement with the conditions, and she at that time had not fully fathomed those and what they were. But I've also spoken with the Public Works Department, and standard operating procedure when you have a parcel map and basically subdivision development is to get the roadway and the right-of-way dedications and improvements at this time. And so, a dedication of a right-of-way is not, an expensive thing or construction, but yet it also calls for the improvements at this point. So as I double-checked with the county engineer regarding maybe the expense or a request to defer, the county engineer, what is Mr. Katata's title now? Senior engineer. Let me know that he's obligated to put the conditions down that apply to parcel maps and subdivisions, but yet it may be within the planning commission's purview should something be waived or deferred or not required. But as a practitioner, asking for the right-of-way improvements, but some of the items. So when I spoke with our applicant earlier, she did not have these numbers enumerated. I would have been in the trenches working and discussing with these. But 8 and 9 are, construction hours and exterior lighting, which applies to all. Exterior lighting just applies countywide. 10 is dust control. 14 and 16 are from Environmental Health Department, talking about sewage disposal, providing details to the health department on where's the septic systems and how are those located. And of course, one of the catch-alls, like a hazardous material, if there are going to be materials stored, the health department wants to know how they're being done. But I think the main money ones might be 18, improve Duncan Avenue with the 32-foot half width and other things like that. Or 27, which I heard mentioned at the end, was annex into Melrose Community Facilities District, so that when there are improvements or maintenance items, that the property owners are participating in the collective CFD district, so that those repairs can be made over time and funded without there being a public burden. So I don't know how detailed you'd care for me to get it or stop at this time, Chair Gibson, but that was quite a few items that she rattled off, and it was a little eye-opening.
Yes.
Eye-opening to me.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Is there any public comment via Zoom?
No comment via Zoom.
Is there any public
Comment now.
Oh, one comment via Zoom.
Okay, David, you've been unmuted.
Yeah, perfect. Good evening to everybody. My name is David Mancera, and I'm here also in support of Sheena and VJ and this property. And just want to share that I'm the regional director for this nonprofit kitchen table advisor that works with a number of farmers in your county. We currently support 13 farmers in your county. And our mission is to support the long-term economic viability of the next generation of small, sustainable organic farmers and ranchers in the region. And I just want to share with everybody that I'm here in support of Sheena and this project because land access, farmland access, and land stability is really difficult. And so this project would be tremendous for one of the farmers we currently support in the region, small, sustainable farmer as well. So I just want to share that with the group, and I appreciate the opportunity to share those comments.
Thank you. Any more public comment via Zoom?
No more public comment via Zoom.
Any public comment in the chambers? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Back to the commission. Is there any discussion about condition number 18? Whether or not it's necessary at this point, being that they're not actually going to build any buildings. It's just a subdivision of the land itself. Or any other comments?
With regard to 18 in particular?
I think that would one that was going to cost money when there are no buildings going up and being sold. Whether or not the commission feels that that's necessary at this time to have that condition in there.
I don't think it's necessary at this time.
I would agree.
I would waive that.
Okay. Is there a motion on the table that would work to that end?
May I ask for clarification? Was the discussion a permanent waiver or a deferment in time, at some point in time, for those would be acted upon?
Sorry.
Can it be deferred until there's a new construction? Or is it a time certain? Because if nothing's going to be built, it doesn't make sense to have them widen the road if it's just for farm use.
I think having it as a condition that is, deferred until construction of new structure buildings might be a good condition for.
Okay.
Let's be clear, though, because if the farmer, needs an accessory barn at only 1,200 square feet to house a tractor and seed, does that make the road improvements, or is it a full house?
I would think it'd be living quarters myself. I mean, if you're putting up a shed to store your ag equipment, it wouldn't make sense that would trigger it. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, there is a project going on over there that may require additional right-of-way. There is a pipeline going to be running between Hollister and San Juan Bautista, and they are looking to run it in the county right-of-way.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's going to trigger anything or not, but there is something over there that is going to be going in our right-of-way, and I'm not sure where yet.
Okay, but would that require the applicant to improve Duncan Avenue?
No, San Juan Bautista will need to do the improvements, but we may need the additional right-of-way.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The right-of-way requirement was number 17.
Okay.
And, that establishes the public domain, if you would, for Duncan.
Okay. So I think the condition that we're mulling over is to make it conditional that they make improvements if a housing structure is built on either one of the lots. I believe that's what we're coming to a conclusion.
Well, it may not just be a housing structure though, right? I mean, what if the applicant comes back with an application similar to what we just approved with the Walnut warehouse? I mean, a large warehouse would still, I would think, potentially increase traffic and perhaps trigger the need to improve Duncan Avenue at that point. I'm a little concerned with making it just about housing.
Okay, so how would you like to word it?
Size of the structure? Or?
So any structure over a certain number of square feet, is that? And then you'll have anything residential, anything over 1 foot for residential, and then a certain number of square feet for any other purpose? Is that what?
Work. Yeah, any residential and anything over, I don't know.
Joel, do you have any words of wisdom for us?
Microphone.
It's up to the commission to determine what parameters should apply. And, you know, if it's a residential structure or a agricultural accessory structure that would increase traffic, I guess you could condition it in that way. Warehouse or processing. Yeah, subject to the county engineer's review.
So is that clear as mud, or?
You ask a lawyer.
So is the wording sufficient then for you to write?
You know, that does give us some guidance is if there's additional trips drawn because we're doing something other than one a farmer farming the property or farmer living in one house. You've got additional residences, or you've got these, now it becomes hopefully, you know, an employment center of some sort. Well, those are additional trips on the road, and we could, it's a threshold for compliance that we can add to the record.
Okay.
Should that be in the motion?
Wonderful. Okay. So do we have a motion to that effect then?
I move that we.
Go ahead.
I move that we adopt the resolution with the amended language with regards to condition 18.
I'm sorry, are we not going to discuss the other items that she requested be removed?
Oh,
as
if you
well?
if you want to.
I do, because I understand the argument that a lot of these don't apply, but they also have ifs associated with them. Many of them do, not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, some of them say things like, if there's going to be additional construction, then the hours must be between this and that. And, you know, the applicant is saying, well, there isn't going to be any, therefore that doesn't apply to us. I would say that the condition should remain in there because it has no impact upon them, therefore they shouldn't object to it being still within the resolution. Mm-hmm. So I'm fine with striking 18 or replacing it, but the rest of them we maybe should look at in a little bit more detail, or else at least, or else just leave them in except for 18.
That's what we were gonna do.
Okay.
I thought you wanted to strike more conditions.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I misunderstood
Okay.
the motion then.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the motion was just to edit condition 18 and leave all the others in place.
Okay.
Is that sufficient? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll
second.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Way seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Item number 7, Home Occupation and Rural Home Enterprise Ordinance Amendments. Batter up.
Hi, good evening. Ariel Goodspeed, Senior Planner with San Benito County. And I am here again to discuss San Benito County Home Occupation Rural Home Enterprise Code Update. We've been to Planning Commission twice, and we have been to the board once. And again, we have an existing code that allows to run limited businesses as a home occupations rural home enterprises. This update was just an opportunity to simplify and fine tune the existing ordinance. Again, it's not going to legalize any nuisances. But following the board meeting on September 28th, they asked that we add a few more items or address a few more items within there, including a component of limited retail under home occupations, code enforcement, cottage food operations, and then staff also wanted to address the business license requirements. So for home occupations, limited retail, under Section D, Item 8, we added, it says that home occupations shall not include any of the following. So sale of products to customers at the premise, but sales to customers off premises or by e-commerce, mail, or telephone order is allowed. So this would allow limited retail, but it would not encumber additional traffic as in keeping with the home occupations intent. Staff felt that this was an adequate way to add, but keep with the residential district. To address code enforcement, in both under the home occupation section H and the rural home enterprise 25.29108, we directed under Title I, General Provisions, Code Enforcement, that code enforcement procedures would be subject if they were not operating within the regulations set forth in both. We have an extensive code enforcement regulation. We didn't feel it purvey to add to our existing code, but just to address that if they weren't following, then they would be subject. So to address cottage food operations, in keeping with the intent of state law, staff felt that it was adequate to address it, that it be considered a home occupation, but that it was going to require additional regulations under state law and the San Benito County Department of Public Health. So state law, they've addressed, there's a very specific prepared food list. For example, you can only do baked goods without creams, custards, or meat fillings, candied confections, vanilla extract, honey, dry, dehydrated dry foods. A very, very specific list that you're only allowed to do. The state requires a food processing training course, implementing sanitary operations. There's very specific compliant labeling, and then they also have to be operating with a specific gross annual sales limit. And then environmental health under the public health requires an additional fee and application, a site inspection, and they also approve the labels under the state. So everything that's under home occupations, they would have to adhere to, as well as the additional specifics under the state and public health requirements. And then we also added language in both the home occupation rural home enterprise that they're subject to the requirements of a business license tax under Title V. And so it's just a reminder to anyone who is going to be operating a business that they would also need to go get their business license. So that was all that was added into the Rural Home Enterprise Home Occupation Code. I'm happy to take any questions or make any adjustments if you see fit.
Thank you. Do the commissioners have any comments, questions, or concerns?
I do, actually. Just a question, really. Being the newcomer here, I don't have the background on this that I probably need. What is the motivation for the change? What problem are we solving?
You know, our original ordinance was a little bit confusing and cumbersome, so it was more to simplify and add better, clearer language on requirements, and not. And one of the main differences that had been done previously was we used to list out specific rural home enterprise, and so instead we just made requirements you can't on how a business operation, because we're not going to have an extensive list of what could or couldn't be a potential business. We also increased for rural home enterprise. We went from 2 employees to 5 previously. There weren't actually too many changes done after going through Planning Commission and the board and the back and forth and discussion.
Thanks.
Commissioner Pack?
Oh, I was just going to, add, there's the added language with regards to the cottage food provisions and the e-commerce provisions. So those are also just sort of updates to reflect modern entrepreneurialism.
Very good, very good. Is there any public comment via Zoom?
No public comment via Zoom.
Is there any public comment in the chambers? Seeing none, public comment is closed. What is the wish of the commission?
I make a motion that we approve the recommendation from the Board of Supervisors and staff.
I second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8, PLN 210052, reconsideration of ag mitigation for the Promontory at Ridgemark, formerly the Bluffs. I will recuse myself from this item as I live across the road. Thank you, sir.
Point of order information, we do have sufficient quorum with just the 3 of us, correct? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Ready?
Whenever you're ready.
Yep. Good evening again, Tavin Kinnison Brown representing the Planning Department. This is a request to reconsider agricultural mitigation for the Promontory development at Ridgemark. The presentation will refresh us on the location and the context of where the project is located, as well as some background, description of the agricultural mitigation measure, the developer's request, and an evaluation of the environmental aspects of CEQA and staff recommendation. So it might be a familiar slide to you, because we were here recently with the architectural but the project located, control red light. The project is located here on a bluff top above South Side Road, nestled into this corner of the Ridgemark subdivision. So just for the public, of course, we have Southside Road leading north, Enterprise. Highway 25 is right here. This is Fairview Road. And some of the other numbers are other subdivisions that have been developed and proposed in the neighborhood. Again, this is the project that was approved, and we'll get there in just a moment. But it was a 90-lot subdivision proposed on acreage that looks like this. The light and dark, I think, is just 2 photographs from the aerial photography laid together. But in April of 2018, the Promontory development at Ridgemark was approved by the Planning Commission, and with those 2 resolutions. And it included an agricultural mitigation measure requiring that prior to issuance of grading permits, a project proponent shall provide a 1-to-1 compensation for loss of important farmlands as designated by the state. And important farmlands have three designations: prime, farmland of statewide importance, and unique farmlands. If there's a conversion of those lands to non-agricultural use, the requirement is 1-to-1, and that, or those acres shall be preserved in perpetuity. So during the CEQA review leading to the Planning Commission's decision in 2018, the developer had challenged the property's prime farmland designation and had submitted some opinions and rationalizations that they thought it was a different designation than prime farmland. Property hadn't been watered, it didn't grow well, and we heard from, in the record, Mr. Brigantino, Roy Lompa, who owned and farmed the property, as well as the project applicant's assistant at that point, Mr. Gary Coates, all submitted letters. But at the decision making in 2018 in April, a lot of the discussion that day was regarding access down the South Side Road and internal street improvements to this subdivision. I want to go back. So they were discussing, internal road improvements, this access road down, and that night was not really discussed the applicant's contention about the prime farmland designation, although it was part of the record. The first motion to approve the project without street improvements failed, and so no action was taken. A recess was made, and when the meeting reconvened, the applicant had offered to provide some on-site affordable housing, 13 units. Another motion was made, and the project was approved 3-2 that night. Following the Planning Commission motions and actions in 2018, commenced an appeal period. If someone, either if it was approved or denied, there can be an appeal made to the Board of Supervisors for reconsideration. So if someone felt one way or the other strongly enough, they could have put an appeal application on the table, and it would have gone to the Board of Supervisors for reconsideration of whatever aspect or the project as a whole. That was not made within 10 days. Also following that, the CEQA challenge period, if someone doesn't care for or wants to challenge the environmental determination or recommendation, that period is a longer period of time of which someone could appeal and have the local jurisdiction reconsider their actions. That was not made. And as stated in the report, not much action was engaged with the planning department on conditions of approval and satisfying, the many conditions that were applied to that map for about 2 years. But it's staff's understanding that the applicant was very much engaged with the Ridgemark homeowners in negotiating access and some other big fundamentals on how to get in and out of the property. So the applicant was working on the project, but just not with the staff on satisfying conditions of approval. Approaching the map's expiration, the applicant approached us to extend the 2-year life of the map that had been approved in April of 2018. And so they submitted a timely application for an extension of the map, and that was granted by the planning director of the time. Reason for the delay and needing an extension was their extensive conversations with the Ridgemark Homeowners Association, but not a new mention or revisit of the agricultural mitigation measure at that time. So let's just go here for a moment. What is the mitigation measure? The mitigation measure, as read, allows 3 opportunities to satisfy the compensation for the loss of important farmlands as designated by the FMMP. To summarize here, one path could be granting a perpetual easement, deed restriction, or other farmland conservation mechanism. Second option is making an in lieu payment to be applied toward the future purchase of a minimum of 36.4 acres of important farmlands. Or third option, making an in lieu payment to be applied toward a future perpetual conservation easement, or any combination of the above. And you'll see written into the conditions are a reference to our local San Benito Agricultural Land Trust as being an authority, a steward and shepherd of agricultural properties. So as the applicant has further engaged their conversation with the Agricultural Land Trust, they learned the cost to them of preserving or dedicating the 36.4 acres would be nearing $870,000. So from that point, we have now received a formalized request, this application right here, to revisit and reprocess the consideration of the application of that mitigation measure to the project. And the applicant and they will certainly be giving a presentation this evening and sharing with you that they believe that the appraisals that were given spoke to the property not being prime farmland, and that also looking into revisiting the map records that were drawn and used in the original environmental impact report. As they've looked closer, they see that the state has changed and updated the designation on the property to grazing lands, which is not one of those three that is protected. Grazing lands is as indicated. And then the second part is that they've asked for the county to take several actions. But I want to go to these maps for a second here. This is a screenshot. Here, let me use this magic marker here again. Our subject property. What do I do? There you go. The little square of the 84 lots on the subdivision is right here. And in the mapping that was applicable in 2012 shows the property as prime farmland. That was in 12. And so that was, a few years as the environmental document was being prepared and being used, items like this being used as a reference. Let me go here. In 2018, the same computer resources, but updated, has a different color and designation on the property and is now shown as grazing lands in 2018. Okay. Subject, and so I'm going to go back one slide here. And so a query was put to the California Conservation Corps, or excuse me, the Farmland Mapping and Monitoring Program. And when and how do you change land use designations? And the response from the mapping and monitoring environmental scientists says, I can verify that the reason that a change from prime farmland to grazing land would occur on our maps is due to a cessation of irrigation at a property for at least 4 years prior to the mapping date. And so that's from the same office as that. And so, and part of the record is the property wasn't being irrigated in recent times. And I think the applicant is here to speak to irrigation as a whole, maybe for the property. Okay. So just staff evaluation of the applicant's request is, their request has two components: the reasoning why the mitigation measures should not be applied, and then they've asked for several actions from the county. One of the, going to the reasoning is they believe that the environmental impact report had incomplete and incorrect data, analysis in the EIR, and that it was improperly applied, and that no mitigable condition exists. And then regarding the actions they wish the Planning Commission to take would be, I was of the point here where I really could have done much more work or had to prepare something for approval, for denial. And my opinion and my practice is generally to offer the Planning Commission my best recommendation with the course of action. Right here, I believe there's so much to it where There's the record, there's the EIO report, the applicant's materials, maybe public hearing, presentation from staff and testimony, and looking for a recommendation from the Planning Commission, whether there's a motion of intent to approve or an intent to deny the applicant's request. So I'm sorry, I'm speaking ahead of myself a little bit here. Should the Planning Commission wish to approve the request, we would need to come back at a later date with the appropriate materials that would support that decision. An addendum to the EIR, a resolution stating the reasons you would lay out here today on why the record should be amended, and we take an action at that point. Or the Planning Commission may not support the request, of which a recommendation of denial does not require an addendum or an additional CEQA document, and it can just be memorialized with your action on a resolution. So just in conclusion, the developer is making the case that the original environmental impact report identified to protected prime farmland and unique farmland was incorrectly applied to the subject property, and that they don't believe that mitigation measures should have been applied. So staff has those two recommendations, which I think I've already introduced here. So I think we'd all benefit from hearing from the applicant at this point, but if you have questions for me, I can address those. As you see, there were many attachments, many resolutions, environmental impact reports. There was a lot in the record.
Commissioners, any questions?
Quite a few, but let's have the applicant come up to speak about the matter. And
may you approach the microphone just a little stronger there?
Yes. Yes. Well, let's have the applicant.
You want to hear from the applicant first? Okay.
And then we'll start with the questions.
We'll have the applicant present first.
Did you wish to come to the podium, or there you go.
Can you hear me? Is this working? Okay, thank you. I am vaccinated, so if you don't mind, just for this talk, I'll remove this. I appreciate your hearing from me. My name is Steve Rowland. I'm an attorney, and I represent Bates, Stringer, Hollister, who is the applicant. Mr. Stringer is here as well. And I agree with the county that that this is somewhat complicated, so let me try and explain this in a way that that is simple. We can put this in really one sentence. An $870,000 mitigation measure has been imposed for farmland where there was no farmland. It's grazing land. Grazing land is not subject to mitigation. Now, I'm going to go through this in detail, but that's the whole thing. There was a mistake made. The reason that we are here is to ask that the mistake simply be corrected. Mistakes happen, that's okay, but we just got to fix it. So that's what we're here for. So let me go back and try and explain all of this. There are really three things that we should tackle. One is the facts. Make sure we all understand what's going on here. Number two, briefly, if you'll indulge me, a couple key principles of law. And three, fairness. What's just fair? Let's start out with the facts. There is zero credible evidence that the land in question was prime farmland, unique farmland, or any farmland. It's been grazing land pretty much forever. There was one item, one scintilla of evidence that was relied on by the county to suggest that this was farmland, and that is the map that was referred to by Mr. Brown, a 2012 outdated, no longer in use map published by the state called the FMMP map. By the time that even the draft EIR was being prepared, that map had already been corrected. there was an updated map that showed this wasn't farmland at all. That's what we call the 2014 map. There's a 2016 map that reaffirms the 14 map, saying this is not farmland. Not prime, not unique, not any. It's grazing land. There's a 2018 map that reaffirms the 16 and the 14 and says this isn't farmland. Now, at the time that the draft EIR was being prepared in 2016 and 17, for reasons that nobody can explain, including the county's consultant, they relied on this outdated, no longer in use, incorrect 2012 map and ignored or didn't check on the subsequent maps. There is no explanation for this. We have submitted some materials in which we went back and forth by email trying to understand what the consultant was doing. The consultant pretty much said there was apparently an error here and it should be corrected. So the county's own consultant agrees with the applicant's position here. There was a whole slew of evidence outside this outdated, no longer in use, improper 2012 map that was submitted in timely fashion before the draft EIR was done and during the EIR process before finalization that showed that this land was not farmland. That included, number one, the county's own maps, because the county publishes maps as well. And the county maps showed this was grazing land. Remember, grazing land is not mitigable, only farmland of certain very high quality. The county's own maps showed that this was grazing land. The EIR consultant that was relying on this 2012 map actually prepared a rather sophisticated, what we call LISA or LESA analysis, land evaluation and site assessment, based on Department of Conservation of the State of California criteria, which showed that this was grazing land, not farmland. That's laid out in several pages in the EIR. After making a conclusion in the EIR that this was grazing land under a LISA analysis, it was ignored for reasons that nobody can figure out. There are aerial photos, even dating to the 2012 period when this incorrect FMMP map existed, that shows that there's no farming going on. That was all submitted, and it's in your materials as well. Mr. Coates, Gary Coates, who has been a consultant for some 40 years doing work in the Ridgemark area, provided written testimony that this land hadn't been farmed in at least 30 years. There was testimony that the land was not irrigated. As was mentioned by the county, irrigation is a requirement to establish prime or unique farmland. But there's no irrigation. There hasn't been irrigation. Mr. Brown mentioned it, there had to have been irrigation within the last 4 years. There's no evidence it was there in the last 30 years. In fact, there's evidence it wasn't submitted by Mr. Coates. By the owner as well. The owner said, we've never farmed this. It's not farmable. Mr. Brigantino, the appraiser, recommended by the county to be consulted about this, said this is Class 3 land. Class 1 or 2 is the farmland that is mitigable, actual farmland. This is Class 3 soil. There's no irrigation. There's no evidence there's been irrigation. It's not farmland. All of this material was in the record. It was completely ignored. And instead, reliance was placed on one data point, the outdated, incorrect 2012 map, ignoring all the subsequent corrections. Now, interestingly, the county, even though the draft EIR had made this incorrect indication that mitigation was appropriate or required based on this incorrect map, the county made a conclusion in its resolution in April 2018 that this was grazing land. In other words, despite the EIR mistake, the county made a proper finding. After the county made a proper finding, and you will find it in the resolution at page 4, if you would care to look, once the county made that finding, it ignored its own finding that this was simply grazing land and imposed mitigation anyway. Who knows why? The developer, Bates Stringer, tried to get this corrected, as was mentioned. The developer submitted additional material in the form of a letter with a bunch of submissions saying, wait a second, hold on, this is all going wrong. That was submitted before the final EIR. There is a response to the letter which is completely non-responsive from the consultant, Rincon. It doesn't answer any of the information or respond to any of the information in the letter. Just ignored it. The EIR was finalized, notwithstanding a proper finding was made in the resolution that this was simply grazing land, but a mitigation measure was imposed anyway, saying, because this is farmland, even though we found it isn't farmland, we're going to impose a mitigation measure for conservation of farmland. Why are we here now? It's been a while. It is true, as was pointed out, that after that resolution, about a 2-year period ensued of difficult dispute resolution with the rest of Ridgemark. I was part of that, and I can talk to it if I need to. It's sort of irrelevant at this point. There came the point in which we're ready to develop, and we take a look at this, and we go back and we start to peel back the layers, trying to understand what went wrong here. And we were talking to the consultant, and the consultant cannot explain what happened, but said there was a mistake. It should be corrected. It's simple. Just do an EIR addendum that says, yes, this is really just grazing land, that no mitigation measure is appropriate. Get rid of the mitigation measure. We're all happy we've corrected the error. That's in your materials, Exhibit 12. The question has been raised, why wasn't an appeal taken way back when? Well, based on the record I've outlined, we probably could all conclude an appeal wasn't going to get us very far. The mistake was pointed out over and over and over again and was ignored. There is no requirement, by the way, of an appeal. An appeal is a process that is available to the applicant, but it is not required. In fact, in this very development, there was an issue about another mistake that was made by the county regarding fees for ADU units, and it was simply corrected. It wasn't any issue of appeals or anything. This was 2 years later. But there was a mistake. When there's mistakes, we fix them. I might also add that, as was pointed out by Mr. Brown, Kinnison Brown, two years ago, there was no indication of what the actual cost of this mitigation measure was. That was only found out 2 months ago, and the number is alarming. It is approaching $1 million, $870,000 to be precise. There was no indication that the mitigation would be anywhere near that. In addition, in fact, the submittal materials that you have shows that it was the understanding of the developer that the number would be a small fraction of that, even if this mitigation measure were to stand. In the staff report, the comment is made, no mistake was made leading into the certification of the EIR. That is false. There was a mistake. It's beyond the pale that there was a mistake. There was reliance on a 2012 outdated, no longer used map as the only information upon which a conclusion was drawn, despite a plethora of evidence to the contrary, that this was simply grazing land of no particular statewide importance, not deserving of protection. Now, just a brief comment on the law. The constitutional requirements for imposing of a mitigation measure and the requirements of CEQA by statute, in the statute's guidelines, are that there be nexus and proportionality for any mitigation measure. What does that mean? Nexus is the mitigation measure must relate to an impact needing mitigation. Here, there's no impact needing or requiring mitigation. The imposition of a mitigation measure cannot have nexus because there is no impact requiring mitigation. The other constitutional requirement is proportionality. The nature of the mitigation measure must be proportional in magnitude or size to what needs to be mitigated. Here, zero needs to be mitigated, and a mitigation measure of $870,000 is being imposed. There is no proportionality. Legally, this mitigation measure cannot stand. I would also point out that the general plan of the county calls out only prime farmland for mitigation. Not even some of these other categories like unique farmland or farmland of statewide importance. It's got to be the very best Class 1 soil, irrigated, prime soil, prime farmland before we mitigate. That is not apparent here where we have grazing land. Let me finish with just a couple moments on just the topic of fairness. We've looked at the facts, we've looked at the law, but what is fair? There's no doubt that an error was made. That happens. That's okay. We all make them, but we just have to correct them. And that's where we are here. It would be fundamentally unfair, just as a matter of equity, to impose close to $1 million penalty on this landowner developer for something that isn't a condition. In fact, it's just the opposite. As was shown on the screen in the presentation by the county, this land is tucked right into the existing Ridgemark development, all of which was grazing land. In fact, in 1983, and this was submitted in the materials as well, in 1983 there was an EIR that said the whole area was grazing land. That was also in the county record. And here we have this little corner that hasn't yet been developed, immediately adjacent to the rest of Ridgemark, that's a natural area for development based on the same land, that grazing land that's already been developed, and yet somehow we've gotten wrapped up into this, oh, it must be prime farmland based on this outdated map. It would be unfair to leave that in place. So I would ask of you that we not look at process as much as really what's going on here. A mistake was made. Substantively, let's please just get it corrected so that we can move on. So we would ask that this commission make a decision tonight that this mitigation measure, which is mitigation measure Ag 1, just be dropped, eliminated, withdrawn from the resolution, a new resolution without it be adopted. Or, at most, that an EIR addendum, such as was suggested by the county's own consultant, Recon, be prepared, which shows that indeed this is grazing land, that a mistake was made, no other part of the project is affected, and that with that addendum in mind, the resolution be adopted, dropping this mitigation measure. I can answer any questions, but that is my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I know it was pretty long.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pack, I know you had some questions.
So my first question, I mean, basically this is a matter of the timetable of the designation of this land. It is, am I correct in my understanding that the longtime owners of this parcel, Roy and Rita Longfellow, they're no longer, they've passed away at this point, or?
You know, they haven't passed away, but the land has been sold. It's now in the development process. So Bates Stringer Hollister got the entitlements, was the project developer. They've sold that project to Century Communities, and Century Communities is literally grading land as we speak.
Okay.
So the ex-owners were the Lampas,
Yes.
the longtime ex-owners.
Okay. So the draft EIR was submitted in September of 2017, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I have a question for Mr. Ellenwood. In your knowledge of environmental law, generally speaking, in the evaluation of the categorization of lands, if an EIR application is submitted in September, on that date, what is the date of the governing map to county council's legal knowledge?
Well, the process under CEQA is that what is prepared is a draft environmental impact report. There's a 45-day public comment period during which anyone who contests any aspect of the environmental impact report can submit those comments. Before the project can be approved, there has to be a final environmental impact report prepared, which responds to the comments that were submitted. And part of the adoption process is to prepare and adopt a mitigation monitoring and reporting report, which is part of the process for adoption or certification of a final EIR. And again, that mitigation and monitoring and reporting report was in part the basis for the condition of approval, which included this agricultural mitigation measure.
Okay. So my understanding.
Commissioner Pack, I might also add, use the word governing map. There's no such thing as a governing map.
Okay.
It is true that 100% reliance was placed on this old, outdated 2012 map in the draft EIR by Rinkine, the consultant. But there's not a law that says there's a governing map.
Okay.
In fact, the law is all of the information that is available should be looked at. And as we pointed out, and I won't go over it again, there was just an immense amount of data that showed that this was just grazing land. And to this day, no one could possibly explain why only one piece of data was used, outdated as it was, and the rest ignored. That was improper in itself.
Is the established burden in these evaluations, is it preponderance of evidence?
I'm not following the question.
Well, just, I just have a question, a point of administrative law, and, because this whole issue boils down to the characterization of this land, and, there seems to be a greater preponderance of evidence in the conservation maps that this land has been designated as grazing land, but there is an outlier piece of evidence that there has been other characteristics, that the California Department of Conservation has also given this land other characteristics. So I suppose, let's go away from the sort of the substantive and get back to the evidentiary. Mr. Kinnison Brown, so what communications has the RMA had with the California Department of Conservation with regards to the history of the designation of this land? I mean, we have conflicting maps in this case across the past decade. Do we know, well, first of all, just as a matter of history and evidence, do we have a history of when this land was designated, either if initially designated as grazing land?
The 2012 map showed that it was farmland.
Yes.
By the time the EIR is submitted in 2017, that has been corrected to show that it's grazing land, which is now consistent with like 10 other pieces of evidence that this is grazing land. So nobody can explain why in 2012 there was a designation of farmland, but that is 5 years out of date and has been corrected and is completely inconsistent with all the facts on the ground.
Through the chair, I believe the question was directed towards staff.
It was.
I wanted to see if we had
This is
received
part of
any
your-
communications from the Department of Conservation on this matter as to why there is this, why and when, and what is the timeline on the change of.
Thank you, Commissioner. No, but as this matter has come to light with the request, I've re-engaged the website to see these images for myself, and then the applicant has submitted for the record this conversation. It is one of the exhibits in your page, and I had it as a slide, was the rationale given by the Water Board for when they would change a prime designation to something else, is, after it has, after irrigation has been discontinued for 4 years. So even if you discontinued water use today on prime farmland, they wouldn't change their map for 4 years, is the way I read that one slide. But I have not personally had a separate conversation with the state at this time.
Well, what I would like to put forward as a question to both parties is, okay, so, we have this testimony from Mr. Coates that he mentions that the irrigation system was abandoned in 1990 and never reintroduced. However, originally the site had an orchard on it. So we do have a period of time where there is agricultural usage. And then we have a period of time where there is usage of this property as grazing. And so if I'm understanding from this agricultural history provided by Mr. Coates, the usage has been, we have a mention here, it has been managed as a volunteer oat hay crop without irrigation. Basically it is the applicant's contention that this site has been used as grazing land since 1990? Would that be correct?
Absolutely. In fact, Mr. Lampa, the owner, said it was grazing land before 1992, but the possibility exists that there was some kind of something more than grazing up to 1990, but that would put us 30 years ago.
Okay.
Way more than 4 years.
And kind of my next question is just sort of a legislative history question, at what point was the categorization of prime agricultural land, or, that's the question, is at what point in the history of the state conservation department would this have been entered as grazing land or conservation land? I'm just trying to get a sense for the history of the maps for this property. And also, I guess that's my next question is, in the course of your due diligence, what designations have you found in the earliest histories of the parcel maps of this property?
It was designated as farmland in 2012. So that's the map that we're focused on, the outdated, mistaken map. Since then, it's been designated as grazing land.
And you have no earlier maps than prior to 2012?
No.
Okay, that's what I was interested in. Or
Does, one second,
Mr.
Commissioner Pack. Sir, I'm sorry, Mr. Stringer, you say you have a map?
No. Hi, Scott Stringer, the developer. The map that was shown earlier by Tavin from the Department of Conservation goes back to 1984.
Okay.
So you can click on there, the same one he showed of 2012 and I think 2018, but you can go on that site and click. It's renewed every 2 years. So you can go back all the way to 1984 and go 2 year by 2 year by 2 year and check it. We did not do that because at the time of the EIR, it was clearly grazing. And I did want to add one other point to the 2012 map, which that we found interesting. even though the map designated in 12 as farmland, if you look at the qualifications at the Department of Conservation, I believe it's in the materials we submitted, it doesn't just have a map with the whole state with colors. Under prime farmland, farmland of importance, unique farmland, they have qualifications to get there. So what also was confusing to us, and why the consultant would have did some sloppy work, in 2012, the map might have shown that, but to qualify for any type of appropriate farmland, it has to have a water source and a delivery system. And that property has neither, never has. If there was a delivery pipe system up there, but they've never had one. So the qualifications to be prime farmland, even in 2012, contradict the map. So if we were really discussing in 12, we'd have that issue to deal with, but in 14, 16, and 18, they've rectified it, and it is now grazing land, which it should have always been, because again, there is no water and there's no delivery system. And I point to Mr. Brigatino, who is a known local appraiser, who said just that. The location, it's carved into Ridgemark, it's not big enough, it's not appropriate for farming, and it has terrible soils and no water and no delivery system. So there's just no way that land, I know there was a reference earlier about an orchard or something. I believe sometime in the history, I don't know when, they tried to do an orchard and the soil was so bad it didn't work and they had to tear it out. Okay. So the soils are just terrible there, which is stated in Mr. Brigatino's letter, the type of soil and how bad that soil is. Heavy clay layer in there. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Mr. Pack, sorry.
Well, that, for the moment, yeah, I'm just reviewing the Brigantino letter, but I think that does kind of conclude. Well, so we could do a search of those maps presently if they're on the state conservation departments. We could do a cursory study to review the map, the overall history. It sounds like the overall characterization of this land has been as grazing land, albeit with one exception, which has not been explained by the State Department of Conservation. Okay.
Any more questions?
Not at this time.
Commissioner Way, you have questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions and one comment. The argument about the appeal likely not being successful, I think, unless I'm misunderstanding the process, seems a bit spurious, because the appeal would have been to the Board of Supervisors, and that's a different body, and they would have, had a different take on it, quite possibly. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. What I'm confused by is, we heard the characterization of the work of the consultant as being sloppy. That was said just a few moments ago by the developer, I believe. And if we believe that that's the case, why are we, the County Planning Commission, being asked to rectify this? Why aren't you seeking restitution from the consultant as opposed to coming to us for this? And the reason why I'm asking that is I'm concerned about, basically this sets could set a bit of a precedent for us in terms of, rectifying something that we didn't make the mistake on in the first place. And I also worry that if we vote to deny the rescinding of the mitigation requirement, that, of course, that will be appealed to the Board of Supervisors within 10 days, presumably, maybe not. But if it is, then that basically gives you a way to reset the appeal clock, and you really only had 10 days to appeal it way back in 2018. And now what it amounts to is that you're getting 10 days from today to appeal it to the Board of Supervisors. So those are my concerns.
Thank you, and I'm happy to respond to those. The issue of restitution from the consultant, We have to keep in mind, this is a consultant that's retained by the county. It's the county's consultant. We can interact with the consultant, but they don't belong to us. We have no right against that consultant. The county might, I suppose. We're not really trying to get into that kind of, we're not trying to do litigation stuff here. We're just trying to fix a mistake. So it's not really a matter from our perspective of getting into a lot of blame. It's just, a mistake happened and let's fix it. The consultant's view, that is the county's consultant's view, is this is a mistake that should be fixed too. They suggested just doing an addendum to the EIR and fix it. The procedural issue in terms of an appeal, as I mentioned before, sure, we could have appealed back then. That doesn't change the fact that there was a mistake. It would be very unfortunate to promote sort of form over substance. The mistake was made. There's $870,000 we now know an issue. Didn't know that then, didn't know that within 10 days, didn't know that until 2 months ago. So an appeal really is not required. An addendum to the EIR could be done today. Frankly, I don't even think that's necessary. This commission has the ability to say we're going to withdraw that mitigation measure because it was improperly imposed and is fundamentally unfair. And so to get wrapped up in the procedural niceties of whether an appeal was required and what should have been done and all the issues there sort of misses the boat, I think. That everybody ought to agree here that there was a mistake that was made and we ought to just fix it.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions?
Just a point of information. Our body is governed under California administrative law, and that is the jurisprudence which we are required to follow. That is correct?
The Planning Commission is governed by the planning and zoning law of the state of California.
Okay.
The administrative law is a completely different body of law related to other matters.
Well, I will just make the comment that, as I will continue to make the comment that I feel that there is a certain amount of evidence that's not within the body of the record, which is to say, kind of what the California Department of Conservation has to say about the history and the timeline of these maps and how it was designated. Do you have any further, have you had any communications with them in regards to how this mistake came to be, or?
No, but Commissioner Pack, let me try to explain this a different way. So everyone agrees, Mr. Kinnison Brown said the same thing, that what you do is you take a map and you do a look back of 4 years from that map and say, was there any irrigation during that 4 years? So was there irrigation between 2008 and 12? The issue here, where we have a draft EIR that's being submitted in 2017 and a final EIR and then a resolution of this body in 2018, is during that period, during a look back of 4 years, was there any irrigation that could possibly have supported farmland? There's an absolute clear rule in the Department of Conservation rules about these maps that you do not designate the land as protected farmland unless it has been irrigated in the last 4 years. So our question is, between 2014 and 2018, was there irrigation on this land? There is no evidence that there was. The only evidence is that there wasn't. What happened years and years before that is sort of irrelevant, although from a color commentary standpoint, we could take a look back 30 years and find no irrigation. But from a legal standpoint, you look back 4 years from 2018 or 2017, was there irrigation during that period? Absolutely no evidence that there was, because there wasn't. That's the analysis.
Okay. And we have multiple parties that are willing to testify to that absence of irrigation. And it's just that if you're starting on September 2017 with an application, the look-back period would be going to 2013. However, because the maps are only updated every 2 years, you would be going off of the 2012 map. And we don't have an explanation from the Department of Conservation as to why that 2012 map made a characterization that is different from the characterizations of the more recent maps.
It's true, we don't understand that, but any 4-year period, whether it's 13 to 17 or 8 to 12 or 1990 to 1994, it's all the same. There was no irrigation. So I just think that the overwhelming evidence here is that this was not protected farmland. And yes, we have this strange anomaly in 2012 that nobody can explain, but it, with all respect, is sort of so what? Because there is so much evidence, 99.9% of the evidence, is that this is not protected farmland. It's overwhelming. You mentioned preponderance of the evidence. That would be 51%. So I think we're getting stuck on it. There's no question there was a mistake here.
Mm-hmm.
The source of the mistake, who knows? But there was a mistake. We just need to fix it.
Thank you. Any public comments via Zoom?
No public comment via Zoom.
Any public comments? Any public speaker cards? No?
No public speaker cards.
All right, thank you. Any more questions, concerns, comments from the commissioners?
Mr. Kinnison Brown, you would agree with that characterization of the evidence, that the overwhelming body of the evidence is that this has been grazing land? There's not really anything to support that it has been used in an agricultural purpose within this century?
I referenced the state website and the most current maps, which show a designation of grazing land, not the historical. And as I've said in the record, if an impact is not identified, there's no relationship to require a mitigation measure for that.
Is there a motion on the table?
Could you open the screen, please? Who's in the box? Because I have the recommendations on the screen if the commissioners wish to draw from that.
Okay. So of course we can remove the mitigation measure entirely. That is one option, or we can just agree to allow a revision and an addendum to the environmental impact report. Okay. So those are sort of two of our three options presently. Now then, well,
thank you for that clarification. Those were the two that staff had thought to put down. If there's other avenues or independent motions, certainly within your purview.
well, okay. Now let me just, I'm just trying to work through this. I don't necessarily, I think that striking mitigation measure AG1, requiring an addendum to the EIR would essentially be striking the mitigation measure, albeit with extra steps and bureaucracy and paperwork, because we have this strong amount of evidence to support that this is grazing land and therefore is not subject to the agricultural mitigation. So, okay. All right, I'm just trying to get a sense. Well, I suppose I will move that we follow with staff recommendations and approve the removal of mitigation measure AG1.
Is there a second? Can I ask a question? As chair, I can second, correct? If I would like to,
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure because
Yes, the chair can second a motion.
Okay, I will second the motion. Can I do a roll call and vote? Mr. Pack, your vote?
Aye.
Mr. Way, your vote?
No.
Myself, aye. 2-1. How does that?
Is that sufficient, given the absence of Mr. Scagliotti?
Right, it would require an affirmative vote of 3 commissioners in order to approve a motion.
Okay.
So how do we,
I think
sorry,
we need
go
to
about
have
this?
more discussions about
Back to discussion
possibly
with
the other 2 options, which is to permit an addendum to the environmental impact report, which would then result in a finding, possibly a finding, and that would allow more consultation with the California Department of Conservation, which would have the advantage of ensuring that, you know, both the state, the county, and the applicant are all on the same page with regards to the characterization of this property.
Well, if I could clarify, an addendum would not accomplish that. An addendum is a limited document. It doesn't require public circulation or a comment period, so it would not accomplish that. The crux of the matter is that there was a tentative subdivision map approved that included a condition of approval, and the condition of approval was that the mitigation measure be imposed. That staff cannot change a condition of approval once it's approved. That power rests only with the Planning Commission. If there is sufficient evidence that there was an error in imposing that condition in the first place, that's up to the Planning Commission to decide that. If the Planning Commission does not agree to do that, then and that would require an affirmative vote of 3 commissioners, then that decision would be subject to appeal to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Another question, sorry. I know we don't want to be, I don't want to waste anybody's more time than we're already going. Having a 4th commissioner, I'm not for it, but if we need to table it to have a 4th commissioner, is that a possibility?
It is. One of the possibilities of how that could proceed would be that Commissioner Scagliotti would have to review the recording of the meeting and be prepared to make a ruling on that basis.
And would this be an appropriate time to make a request for additional evidence for the record? Or, because as I said, I'm interested in kind of hearing the timeline of the Department of Conservation's characterization of the land, and we have definite local evidence as to the characterization of this land as not being farmland and not being in usage as farmland, and I'm inclined to support that. I'd like to make a request.
Well, the
of
determination of the appropriate characterization of the land is for the Planning Commission to decide, and not for the Department of Conservation. The Department of Conservation adopts maps and it revises maps over periods of time based on whatever evidence comes before them. That's a process that's not very transparent.
Those maps that the Department of Conservation has are based on maps that are provided by the county?
No,
No.
they're not.
Okay.
They're based in large part on aerial photography.
Okay.
So would it be, sorry, Tavin, you had something you were going to say beforehand, or? No. Would it be appropriate to start discussion amongst ourselves again?
Absolutely, you can deliberate, and you inquired about the potential of a motion to table. That's a possibility for you to consider as well.
Okay.
I think at this time that tabling the motion so that we can have a fuller consideration by four members of the commission, and having also, Mr. Scagliotti is a longtime farmer with longtime farming experience, so for that. Though, one thing that, I would like to kind of perhaps enter into the comments, and perhaps we can go in about this roundtable, is, of course, I've already mentioned, information and evidence that I would like to evaluate in considering this matter. Perhaps, Mr. Rodriguez, if you could also speak about what you consider to be sort of unclear issues in this matter that you would like to see further elaboration upon in the record.
Yeah, I'm not finding much unclear here. It seems to me that a process existed for objecting at the time. The process was not followed, and this is a risk of doing business. You took the risk, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And the fact that it was discovered that the cost was so high, and now because of that, you've come back to us to request an exemption, to me, actually speaks against your position of the applicant, not for it. So, sorry, but that's my position.
So basically, your position is kind of a substantive that they failed to be timely in the filing of their appeal, and therefore the basis of the appeal should be rejected on the basis of a lack of timeliness. Okay.
I understand where where you're coming from, but also too, it's getting hit with a large bill 2 months prior, not knowing it. It'd be different if it was known then compared to now. That's how. And I mean, growing up here, I'm not a farmer, but growing up and driving that area, I've seen nothing but grazing out there. So it's kind of hard for me where.
I can mention purely anecdotally, but I understand that the Lampas have been, property holders there since somewhere in the 1950s. I know that they're ranchers, but I don't know the exact day-to-day characteristics of their operations.
So I think I'm going to make a motion that we table this, so Commissioner Scagliotti can be a part of this discussion as well. So that'll be my motion, table.
Can I comment on that?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm unclear on what the effect of that will be, because it seems to me like the majority of the commissioners who are here are unhappy with the effect of the decision that would be made without Mr. Scagliotti, and invoking him just to undo basically my objection seems a little bit.
No, I understand, but I think we're going to end up going back and forth most of the evening. I think it would give us more time to actually look into this further and have a better understanding of this, because I mean, it is a lot of information. That's where for me, it would give me a lot more time to look and obviously
give a second reading, and it would also give all parties an opportunity to further supplement the record to address the issues that we have raised in our discussions tonight.
So through the chair, for any motion.
Just on that, you're conducting a public hearing. The public hearing has a beginning and it has an end, and a submission of additional evidence is not appropriate once the public hearing is closed.
Okay.
But the time for deliberation and, if necessary, involving a fourth commissioner in the final discussion and resolution of the matter is within the commission's discretion. If there was not a decision to table the matter, then there would be an insufficient vote to approve the application, to rescind the condition of approval, and then the applicant, if it chose to, could appeal it to the Board of Supervisors.
Mr. Scagliotti has previously served on the County Board of Supervisors back in the 1990s, if I remember.
Different
So-
Scagliotti.
Oh, wrong, Robert, Richard, same family. Okay. Well, nonetheless, Mr. Scagliotti has long-standing and valuable experience in San Benito's agricultural history, and yeah. As such, I move to table this matter until we can get a larger quorum of commissioners to evaluate and participate in the discussion.
I will second that. If we can do a roll call again. Commissioner Pack?
Aye?
Commissioner Way?
No.
Myself, aye. So now, is this going to be
We do
insufficient?
not have quorum.
Oh.
The motion to table fails.
Okay. So, I guess speaking on this, do we would further discuss this, or if we just, or is it insufficient? I mean, how do we, how is this process? I'm sorry, it's kind of,
Let's
I've never
try
been
to
in this
speak towards
situation.
the substantive law issue here, which is so, okay, can we get a reading of the exact provision of the time period, can we bring up the exact statute in regards to the time period for filing an appeal for this mitigation measure AG1?
The time period for filing an appeal of a decision by the Board of Supervisors is 10 days from the date of notice of action.
And the notice of action was given in this case on
In 2018.
2018. Okay, so the proper time, so the timely period would have been sometime in September of 2018. Okay. And in the law of the statute, is there anything with regards to late filing or circumstances under which filing of an appeal can be made after that period?
No.
There is not.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if it please the chair, haven't we actually voted on the mitigation measure, on the rescinding of it, and the conclusion of the commission tonight was that we would not do that, and we voted not to table the measure further, so do we have any additional action to take? Isn't it now up to the applicant to go to the Board of Supervisors if they choose to do so?
That would be correct. Would that be correct? I'm sorry. Yeah.
That would be a correct characterization of the result of the votes.
Yeah, because there are two potential options that we can still vote on, which is, one is to, permit the addendum to the EIR, which it sounds that we are unlikely to get a consensus upon that vote. And the other option would be to just reject the application altogether, and it sounds like we are unlikely to get a consensus on that. And
Well, the effect of the vote that it has occurred amounts to a rejection of the application. because it would require an affirmative vote to approve it of 3 commissioners. And that has not occurred. So by default, it is, the application is rejected.
Okay. So, then we have it. It's a timely filing.
Thank you. Ooh, it's low. Okay. So having ended the public hearing, we're at commissioner announcements. Do any of the commissioners have any announcements to share?
No, none.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second? Commissioner Pack seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you all. Have a good evening.